Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. DCL serves a broad client base spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Mercy Pilkington, Senior Editor at Good eReader and CEO of Author Options. She has taught in one of the first all-digital classrooms in the country during her years teaching in a juvenile correctional facility. Without further ado, welcome Mercy.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Okay, today we're going to be looking at the concept of using ebooks in the classroom. Again, we're specifically talking about the K12 market. Ebooks have worked their way into the higher education sphere quite nicely. They've been used for student choice. They've been used in, of course, digital textbooks. And that's been one of the ongoing concerns with digital publishing and academic publishing, is that all these great innovations are readily making their way into higher education, while one of the areas that really does need the convenience and the financial ease of ebooks is not getting them yet. So we want to talk about ways that teachers can actively use ebooks and take advantage of all the different benefits. So the very first question we want to ask is why? Why do we really want to push ebooks on students? And we have a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons we'll go into a little more in depth. Some of them are just so obvious that we don't really have to spend too much time with them. But first of all, the convenience of digital publishing. That's one of the topics that first came up when e-readers first got big back in 2009, 2010, when they became a widespread market tool. Was that convenience, that ability to not only store and carry all of your books that you need in one centralized device, but also the ability to buy books readily. That's an issue that actually plagues teachers, is the purchasing of books. So whether we're looking at the teacher or the school system purchasing the material, or if we're looking at the students being required to purchase material, it's not quite so streamlined as it is for college when we're talking about public education. When you're talking about even the middle grades, the students, even in high school, the students don't have access to their own spending, their own credit cards to order materials. They can't take themselves to a bookstore necessarily. One of the problems that we keep running into in the world of publishing is the lack of understanding that even just the U.S. market, whether we're talking about retail or we're talking about academic, the U.S. market is so diverse and so widespread that no two school systems face the same obstacles. And if you think about that great science fact that the United States actually encompasses all of the world's biomes. We have desert, we have rainforest, we have tundra, the plains, everything. We have suburban areas, rural areas, of course, urban areas. We keep letting decisions be made from major cities, not taking into account the fact that for many students and their families, literal access to a location to purchase a book is limited in many cases. So, for example, my town, we don't have a bookstore. We have a library with limited hours because we're a small population and it's geographically not well centered, and we just don't have the access to books that we'll find even in a large city nearby, maybe an hour away. So while my state doesn't have any real metropolis locations like we find in New York or Chicago or Houston, we still find that we run into these convenience issues. We're going to come back to special needs accessibility because that's such a major issue all by itself, and we're going to have another slide on that one in a second. But let's skip down to interactivity. When digital textbooks came along and the enhanced ebooks came along, critics argued that they were really just bells and whistles. They were simply digitized edition of the print book, of the flat book, with a few extra things thrown in. And first of all, yes, that may be true. We did have audio narration. highlighted text, embedded hyperlinks or videos. But that interactivity comes into play in the classroom setting in such an important way. If I'm just simply sitting at home and reading a book, I may not care to have maps that pop up and show me where the characters are, or dictionary hyperlinks that pop up and explain a word to me. But that can be very important in a classroom setting when you're dealing with as many as 40 and 45 different learners who bring different prior knowledge to the table. So that interactivity is an actual benefit, especially in the K-12 market. One that we often overlook is we keep coming across curriculum that still requires the same old works of classic literature. But what so many people don't understand is that those ebook editions of those classic works often are free, especially through major retailers, because they're in the public domain. When you go to a bookstore to purchase a copy of a title that is now in the public domain, you are actually paying the cost of the printing and the construction of the book. You're also putting into it the publisher's own operating expenses. And so while it's all well and good to go pay $15 for an old work by Edgar Allan Poe, for example, what you're actually paying for is the publisher's cost of operation, not the royalties on the book itself. So an ebook edition of many of these classic works are going to be free for the students to download on their own and read without having to go actually make the purchase. One of my favorite topics on how digital technology can help us so much in the public education sphere is classroom management. And people often overlook the tie-in between great technology that serves many purposes and how a classroom is actually run. People who are outside the education sphere, when we talk about classroom management, we're actually talking about discipline. It's just a nicer way to say, what do I do with my problem students? What people fail to understand, especially at the high school level, middle school, it's where it's starting, I guess. Even elementary school, you'll have a handful of students where this is the case. If I'm a low ability level student and I walk into my English class and the teacher is passing out print copies of a novel that we're all going to read together, I understand that my classmates are about to discover publicly just how dumb I am. And while that's a harsh assessment, it is what's running through the minds of many, many students. And so all these opportunities in class where students either read self-selected text and report on it, or that we have a whole group instruction, basically it's just another opportunity for me to not be the person in the lead, to be behind, to be humiliated. And so what do? I cut up. I cause problems. If I can get kicked out of the classroom, nobody will find out that I don't read well. I will not be called on to read out loud, which teachers love to do just to make sure that we're all following along on the same page. And I can also avoid any issues coming up with, how well or well not, how I don't read, how I couldn't afford the book, for example, if the students were required to buy the book. And so ebooks can really make a big difference in classroom management. First of all, if all of my students are reading on e-readers or tablets or even their own devices, who's to say that the one student I know in my class who really struggles academically is even reading the same book? I may have assigned him a classics literature, the illustrated classics, excuse me. I may have given him a code for one of those. So everyone else is reading Jane Eyre in 12th grade English and he's reading the comic edition of it. I don't know. Nobody knows that. As long as we're all reading on our own devices or reading ebooks on even school supplied devices, nobody has any way of knowing that he's not reading the same thing that everyone else is. And so establishing this classroom environment where students know they're not going to be humiliated, they're not going to be called on publicly and forced into demonstrating their lack of ability is going to go a long way for classroom management. I've erased any need for self-defense discipline problems. One thing I noticed when I taught public school was when it was time for all of us to read the same novel together, attendance dropped. You wouldn't think that's true in public education. You might think of that in college when you could get by with skipping a class or two. But no, these students would rather stay home and risk truancy and risk suspension than demonstrate to their classmates that they don't read well. So basically ebooks stand to eradicate a lot of that issue by helping the students understand and see that they're valued and that their contributions to the discussion are valued even if their reading ability is not quite up to the same level as their classmates. The final one is capitalized, and that's price. One of the things that keeps demonstrating itself as a conundrum in ebooks and digital publishing is that ebooks are often the same price as the print counterpart, and that's especially true in traditional publishing. So some of the books are not going to really be affected that well, but some will. Right now, I looked it up just to be sure today for this webinar, a hardcover copy of To Kill a Mockingbird is still between $18 and $26, depending on the retailer. The paperback will be between $7 and $12, depending on the retailer. And today, the ebook edition is $3.99. And so if I have students who are required to purchase their own materials to participate, especially in honors and AP classes, then that price point is really going to help those students. So if I just simply put it on the board, here are the places you can order your copy of your book, or you're going to go to the store and purchase this book, I can list that as an option, and students and their families will know that they have the ability to purchase it far cheaper than many of the other formats. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, I said accessibility was actually going to be its own slide because ebooks stand to help accessibility in a wide variety of ways. There have been studies conducted and surveys presented on all of these topics, and these are just a few of them. These are issues that I actually ran into in my own classrooms and have found studies that now demonstrate that ebooks and digital publishing, whether it's on e-reader, tablets, phones, computers, whatever, can actually address a multitude of issues. The first is autism spectrum, of course sometimes referred to as ASD or Asperger's. In that particular case, I've taught many students over the years with autism, and my own child is severely autistic. One thing we have found is specifically the e-reader, where the screen is very muted, and we use that e-ink technology, really goes a long way to helping children with autism spectrum disorder. And the reason for that is there's so much less happening in the book. We're not turning pages, we're not feeling the texture of the pages, which you and I might not really even notice, but trust me, a child with sensory issues may even notice the feel of the pages and not be able to hold the book. The weight of the book in the child's hand. Any stimuli that cause the child to step out of that book for a second, any sensory stimulus, is going to take the child out of the story and drop that comprehension ability. Once the child has to keep going back and going back and going back and reading again in order to understand the text, that's when he's going to stop bothering. And I would too, and I'm supposedly normal. ADD and ADHD. Those are two areas that we've also found that not just the sensory issues, but the actual font size are really improved when we're able to improve that font size and raise those letters up. That's when we see that ADD and ADHD students tend to do better, not only in the time that they spend reading, but also in their overall reading comprehension. Now, if you think about an ADD student in your classroom, what does he usually get in trouble for? He's perfectly capable academically, usually. He's actually even possibly interested in the course material. He gets in trouble for causing little problems or causing little disruptions that he may not even be aware he caused. And one that I've seen too many times to count are the students who either tap the desk or click the pen or shake their leg, and the teacher gets upset. After the third time she's told him to stop it and he doesn't realize he's doing it again, he's out, and she sends him to the office. Well, of course that causes antagonism, that causes problems. No student comes back from the office or from detention or suspension and walks into the classroom and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry I did that. Let's start over fresh, Mrs. Smith." No, it breeds antagonism in the classroom because the student wasn't even aware he was disrupting class, and yet he got in trouble for it. But when you talk about an e-reader, sometimes a tablet, if you raise the font size on this device, so the student is only seeing 3 or 4 words per screen, he's able to read it, but his hand is constantly moving. He's either tapping that next page button or swiping his finger across. Some of them you can even shake it and turn the page. So maybe he's shaking his device. Who knows? Whatever the case may be, he's actually able to establish a rhythm of read, 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 swipe. Read, 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 swipe. So we've got word, 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 turn the page. And so he's able to establish a pattern where he's basically going pause, 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 tap, pause, 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 tap. And so he's able to keep that fidgeting pattern moving in a purposeful way that is not bothering his peers, that is on task, and that the teacher has addressed with him and said, I've got a great way for you to stay moving while you're reading. And so she's basically enabling the issue he already has to be a support rather than a hindrance. Now, I've taught far fewer students with dyslexia over the years because I've been fortunate enough to work in school systems where we've got a lot of great support for dyslexic students. And as an English teacher, that was a specific area where most of my students with dyslexia or further down who had learning disabilities had the option to get one-on-one or small group instruction in English. So I have far less experience with those two issues, but have seen a lot of studies that show that even dyslexic students can do very well by increasing that font size. So when they literally have only 2 or 3 words on the screen, that jumbling that happens as they're trying to read is drastically improved. And so it helps them a lot in terms of feeling like they can do this. If you hand that child a 400-page novel and say, we're all going to read this together, he's going to shut down on page 1, basically because we have not enabled him to use the tools at our disposal in order to address the reading the way he needs to. Vision impairments, that's an area that I came into a lot with my public school students and also in the private sector where I worked with disadvantaged students. In that case, I ran into quite often students who had never been diagnosed with a vision impairment or who had been diagnosed and did not have access to their glasses. The glasses broke, the prescription changed, their needs changed over time, and they were not able to have their glasses. So for whatever reason, there was a vision impairment that we were not able to address. And again, if I hand him a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, what is he supposed to do with that? Other than hold it very close to his face and be laughed at for his inability to see, or he's not going to be able to read it. And that's a very frustrating thing. So as the teacher approaches and says, why aren't you on page 20 with the rest of us? It's because he can't see page 20. So again, he's the person who bore the brunt of the discipline for something that was beyond his control. So again, increasing that font size is going to help that student. ESL and ELL, if those letters are new to you, we have English as a second language, which is a slightly older term, and we have ELL, which is our English language learners. There's actually a difference in those two students. An ESL student is considered to have some English ability, whereas an ELL student is that child who came to your classroom today from his foreign country with zero ability to speak English. And again, if we're talking about a middle school or high school setting, he's not going to read this classic work of literature that the rest of us need. But at the same time, if he needs to be reading far more juvenile material, you don't hold him up in front of his 8th grade classmates and give him a book, even an ebook, that's on a childish level. Unfortunately, that's what he needs right now. That's the level where his language is. He may be brilliant. He may love to read. He may even be an author in his native language, but in English he's not. And so again, the ability to put him at a different table or a different desk with a device and nobody knows what he's reading is going to give him the tools he needs to build up those English skills without having to demonstrate to the rest of the class that he's farther behind. Finally, my low ability level readers, and again, we're not labeling that as any kind of disability or special need, it's just an accessibility issue. And so students who just don't read well are going to have different needs than students who do, or who enjoy reading. One of the things that has always bothered me as an English teacher, and I love English, I love literature and reading and writing, but I'm constantly bothered by the perception that reading somehow makes you worthwhile and intelligent. It feels like, if I walked up and said that I'm horrible at math, that does not make me unintelligent. If I failed science class, again, it's concepts that were beyond my understanding. If I don't have a good grade in history, that's because all those dates were just so hard to remember. But when you get to English, if you're not a strong reader, we somehow equate that to a lack of intelligence. And that not only hurts them in class, of course, but it hurts that understanding of what they think they're capable of. So students who have been held back a grade or who are in the lower reading classes or who constantly see class assignments where they're not a part of the group, where they're not on task, they're not catching up, those students, they feel like they can't do anything in their other classes as well. So using an ebook, whether it's just to increase the font size or just to make fewer words per page, whether it's to let them use the read aloud function on certain models of devices, anything we can do that's going to let them continue to do the work, even if it's a different version of the book, and let them be a part of the instruction, is going to build up those reading skills and their own feeling that they can do this. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, I've just put an example here of what it looks like on, now this happens to be a Kindle, but lots of devices will do it. Even iPads and iPhones or smartphones within the app will let you pinch the screen or move your fingers out to make them bigger. But you see we have a big spectrum there of what the font can look like. So typical readers or people who love to read can lower that font size and have a lot of content in front of them. People who do not love to read or who have any kind of accessibility issue, a vision issue, a learning issue, they can raise that font size up dramatically. And that will help them in terms of blocking out extra content that they can't process right now, focusing on this content in front of them, and a variety of other things. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see text-to-speech. And again, this happens to be a feature on Kindle e-reader devices, and it is determined by the publisher. The publisher is allowed to determine that this title will not have that enabled. A lot of books, especially for school-age students, do have that feature enabled because that's not a big market for audiobooks. So a current John Grisham bestseller might not have that enabled because the publisher knows that readers who like audiobooks will purchase the audiobook. But that's not typically true of middle grade and high school students. Those are far lower price points and far less sales in the audio. And so text-to-speech allows the student to follow along with words that are highlighted. The page will turn automatically, and a voice will read to him. The only problem with that is that it is not an audio recording. It is a computer-generated text-to-speech program, and so it is somewhat robotic sounding. I've had a lot of students over the years who would start to listen to the audio, and partway through their book they would quietly take off their headphones and hang them up on their desks, and I'd say, you just couldn't do it, could you? And they're like, no, she's annoying. And they were talking about the very robotic text-to-speech voice. However, I had just as many students who knew this was the only way they were going to get to enjoy this book. And they would do that especially for a book that was getting a lot of discussion. So the recent movie that came out, The Fault in Our Stars, if everyone's talking about that, even if they can't read, they want to know what's going on, and they want to be a part of that group discussion. And so they'll put up with that robotic voice just to get that support to know what they can do. One of the things I would encourage all my students when we would have some dedicated reading time with our e-readers and devices, I would tell all of them, go ahead and put your headphones on, because they had headphone ports. And so if you don't want to hear her voice, at least you'll block out the sound. And that way no one knew who had activated the text-to-speech. So none of the students knew which person was struggling and had to have it read to them. It was optional. I never required people to sit there with a pair of headphones on, but a lot of my students would actually take me up on that. They liked that feeling of blocking out external stimuli while they tried to read, even if they weren't listening to the voice. Okay, we can look at the next slide. Okay, what is an ebook? So basically, as we're talking about the public education setting, what constitutes an ebook? We may all be familiar with the traditionally recognized novel, the thing you buy on Amazon and read on your device or your tablet or through your app. So we still have those, and those are great in the public school setting when, again, everyone has to read Sounder or Bridge to Terabithia. We could read the ebooks. Again, if it's something that the students are purchasing, give them the option and say, here are some places where you can order the print edition, but you're going to have to give them lots of warning to make sure it has time to arrive before they need it. Or you can tell them, and here's where you get the ebook, and send that home to parents. And with the parents' documentation, send them the prices. Some students absolutely prefer print, and we are seeing studies that show, especially middle grade students, they still love print books. Devices are for other things. Devices are for either schoolwork or playtime. And so when it's time to read a book, even a self-selected text, a lot of students are still choosing print books. But we are moving away from that, especially with price and convenience to consider. audio renderings of books. And I say audio rendering rather than just audio book because there are a variety of models. We have subscriptions where you can have so many ebooks per month as an audio download, and we have, of course, Audible, but we have MP3s of books as well. And so the audio edition is still an ebook in the public education setting. And those are actually really handy tools, especially if your students are wearing their headphones, listening to the unabridged version of an audiobook and reading along. Because one thing that other students are not aware of is he listening to music, or is he having to listen to the audio and follow along with someone reading to him? And so again, that was something that you set up in the climate of your classroom. If your students are allowed to listen to quiet music through headphones while they read, even their print books, if they're allowed to take out their phones or their MP3 players and listen to music while they read, great. A lot of people like to do that. And by the way, it's what they do at home. So there's no reason not to let them do it at school. But at the same time, if you have that climate taking place in your classroom, any student who needed the audio book for extra support or for extra reading, he could be listening to that and nobody would have any way of knowing. And so that's something you establish with a student on an individual basis. Offer him that support and say, hey, you can listen to it through headphones and nobody knows. They don't know you're not listening to your music, and see if that helps them and helps them get more involved in their reading. The next one, gosh, I hope I'm not so far behind the times that everyone else knew about this, but I love Wikipedia's book creator tool. And if we could go forward one slide, I'll show you a screenshot of that. This lets teachers anyone, but especially teachers, go to Wikipedia, you activate the book creator, and while it's enabled, you'll see that word disabled in the middle of the screen. While it's enabled, you click on pages in Wikipedia and build your own PDF of information. And so rather than sending your students to Wikipedia to find information, because you might get information you're not wanting them to have, or they could end up on the wrong page, basically you can build an ebook, as long or short as you want it to be, full of information from Wikipedia, and say, guys, open up your PDF there, open up your ebook. And you could do this with any class. This would lend itself very well to history, math, and science in all the fields of all three classes. And also, if you build a book that you really liked, it really helped your students, you can even order print books of it, and they'll send you the print book of your PDF. Okay, we'll step back one slide. Okay, blog posts. Those are actually ebooks. If you're reading blog posts in class, those are a great way to get information, to read them on a screen. There are a lot of authors who blog constantly about different issues. So one way to bring in digital is to bring in blog posts surrounding a book. So if you know you're going to be reading a book soon, let the students browse that author's blog and get to know that author. Surely there are other teachers and other students who blogged about a certain book they've read. And so those are a great way to impart more information. Even if your students are going to use the print edition of a book, blog posts are an excellent way for them to learn more, get more connected to the text, and enjoy that digital experience that some of them do like. Now, enhanced ebooks have been around, and we're going to find those a lot more in the preschool, kindergarten, and maybe first to third grade areas. Those are mostly our app books, and we're finding out that the apps really did not do as well in the market as a bookshelf of apps provided by one company. So different companies now have basically their own storefront or their own, they call it bookshelf, and within that bookshelf you can buy different titles rather than having to hunt for these on the app stores. And so an enhanced ebook is going to often include audio narration that the student can turn on or off. We'll have highlighted text while they read, so they can highlight it with or without the audio again. And then it will include different features, games and quizzes and all kinds of extra little, again, what we used to call the bells and whistles, but that we're finding out really are important when students, especially struggling students, are reading ebooks. And finally, we have digital textbooks, and those are the very traditional concept of how digital first made its way into education. From the beginning, digital textbooks were simply a screen version of a print book. And I do remember that certain companies were actually marketing that fact, saying that the student who's looking at the book on an iPad is on exactly the same page number as a student who's using a print edition. And that is good for schools where there is a sharing happening, where there are only so many devices or so many copies of the book. So that page by page lining up was important, but now we're figuring out that that's really not the best use of digital technology when we look at a book in the classroom. So as I said before, they'll have embedded videos, hyperlinks, maps, character lists if it's a play they're reading. There's a lot of great content that gets embedded with that digital textbook, and it simply makes the information more realistic and more engaging to the students, especially to the struggling readers. It would be interesting to see the day when text is actually the add-on feature of movies. So if we're streaming movies about something and then a box pops up with some information for us to read, like the old pop-up video movies. I see that happening in education fairly soon. Okay, we can skip ahead, and again we've addressed the book creator, so let's take a look at how. Now, it's all well and good once we've discussed that eBooks are a powerful tool and that they're very helpful in the classroom setting, in the K-12 classroom setting. How do you go about doing it, especially if you're in a school that's limited by funding or device? First of all, we've talked before in previous webinars about the Bring Your Own Device initiative. That is becoming more and more common around the country, because if you look at the situations we used to have, especially when I first became a public school teacher, I remember it was a suspension if you were caught on campus with a cell phone. You know, you had to leave it locked in your car, leave it at home. Your more progressive school systems would say it had to have the power turned off and be left in your locker. And luckily we've gotten away from that climate. I know there are so many people who still disparage the overuse of devices by teenagers. If you look at them as a powerful tool, they're nothing to make fun of. I know the actual situation that changed devices for the school where I taught, and that was the Columbine shooting. And what really came about was parents who spoke out afterward, who said, my daughter had a cell phone in her purse. If she'd been allowed to have it turned on, she could have called and at least warned her friends, if not called for help. Parents who said their son's phone was in his locker. And again, if the students had been allowed to have their phones on their persons with the ringer turned down or on vibrate, they could have helped each other out. And that really did change the perception of devices in the educational setting in a widespread way. And I hate that it took something like that event to make that true. But basically, we look at students. Some of our students, yes, do not have a lot of support at home and may not have a lot of funding, but we've got just as many students who have an iPhone, who own an iPad or a MacBook or Kindle Fire, and what do? We tell them to leave it at home. You're not allowed to bring that here. And that's ridiculous, because what are we going to do? We're going to go buy a computer to make them work on it, because we need that technology for our students, and we need that under so many different curriculum initiatives. Cut out that middleman and cut out that funding and say, your parents bought you one, bring it on. Let's see how we can use this in your class and for your studies. So a lot more schools are exploring Bring Your Own Device. And if you need help instituting that, there are lots of resources online if your school doesn't already have it. One thing that a lot of schools have done is let it pilot. So let certain teachers who have a great track record of innovation and of classroom control, let them be the pilot program where we try it out. Let certain grades or certain subjects use it. And they quickly see how to make it work and how to tailor it to their own needs in their school systems. We also have school-owned devices. So just as many schools have said, we don't want the hassle, we don't want to worry about broken or stolen devices or students accessing things they shouldn't, we're going to supply the devices. Either way, now that the devices are here, however they got to the school, let's go ahead and use them and put eBooks on those. PC-based reading, so basically taking advantage of those classroom PCs or classroom laptops or the computer lab, we're seeing a tremendous shift back to PC-based or browser-based reading, we're calling it, in the digital publishing industry. Because basically at one point all these books were standalone, we had the app books, you had to download your own apps, and then you actually had to download the book itself to your app. And so a lot of companies have said, that's ridiculous. Wi-Fi is everywhere. We've got the broadband now. We don't need to do this. And so digital textbooks, even novels, can be accessed through the browser on a device. And so you don't have to have codes. You just have to have the license to use it. Grant funding is abundant. There are constantly grants available, especially for technology initiatives. especially for literacy initiatives. So we've got a twofold approach to finding funding sources to get ebooks into the classroom. And some of those grants even include that broadband that schools will need in order to access browser-based reading. So again, the money is out there if you can look for it and find it. Donor programs. There are also lots of programs that let people give to schools, and what's cheaper than a $3 book, to give to a school? And so you can establish your own teacher page to say we're trying to build an ebook library, or we need 40 copies of this book for the devices in our classroom. Whatever. You get to tailor your donor program through things like Donors Choose. There's one even restaurants have. Sonic has Limeades for Learning. And of course I've gotten the Dollar General Youth Literacy Grant many times over. I believe I got that 3 years in a row, and that's what paid for the Kindles in my classroom, and ultimately about $1,500 worth of ebooks to go on those devices. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, but the when. In a crowded curricular day, when are we supposed to just read ebooks? Well, that's a problem, and it's the same problem teachers run into whether it's ebooks or print. I remember teaching 9th grade and finding out I was required by the state to teach Great Expectations, and my first thought was that book is 58 chapters long. Now, I happen to love that book. I couldn't guarantee that my students were going to love it, but I did. But the real thing came down to time. We were on the block schedule system, so I had 18 weeks with these students. I still had to cover all the grammar and writing, had to cover Romeo and Juliet, a couple other things, but I remember looking at how many chapters there were and thinking, I don't know how to make this work. How are we going to read a 58-chapter book together? And we got creative and we got it done, but it is still a problem. With so much packed into the academic day, when do you just read? First of all, reading across the curriculum. And that remains as a buzzword in education. We want to see that cross-curricular approach to all instruction, especially reading. With so much focus on reading and our reading scores and our literacy rates in the U.S., that continues to be a way that we say every teacher, your PE teacher even, is responsible for fostering literacy at the school. And so it's something that teachers who did not come to education with a lot of their own tools in reading have now found themselves being required to turn in lesson plans that say how they address reading and how they address literacy. So your math teacher and your history teacher are throwing up their hands and wondering, what am I responsible for? And so there are ways to incorporate reading, whether it's just like the second item, deer time, drop everything and read, whether it's having students read while you pass out supplies. You've incorporated that reading time into your lesson plan for the day. And ebooks make that even more possible. How much time gets wasted for the students to dig out their book out of their backpack, tell you they didn't have one, go get one off your shelf of books you keep in the back of the room, when they could all grab their device and open their book. It's right there in their app, and they are now reading. If you're passing out novels for a whole group instruction where the entire class will read a certain title, again, you've got the passing out of the books, finding the page you left off on, and taking up the books at the end of the class period. That is wasted instructional time. And so ebooks are going to erase a lot of that inconvenience and a lot of that wasted time. Self-guided and self-paced reading. Again, you're telling students, I don't care what you're reading, it's self-selected. Self-selected texts and learning initiatives on self-selected texts are a major component in most curriculum now. And so basically, again, an ebook basically gives them unlimited access, especially if your school has something like Overdrive for its library. You've got the world of ebooks right there. Pick something. There's no such thing as I don't have a book today, and there's no such thing as I couldn't find anything good to read in the library. That's gone because you've basically provided every possible written word that's been digitized on some app somewhere. So, and finally, whole group instruction. Again, this is where you've got 40 students per class period reading the same book. One of the real problems I had with whole group instruction when I taught school was only having 40 copies of the book, but I taught 240 kids a day because I taught 6 classes. And so basically we spent 2 weeks sitting in our hard plastic desks reading the book in front of us because I only had 40 copies of it. And so students who are going to be given an ebook have the option to get a cheap book or a free book even, and I can have all of my students read it, and we can cut that to a week. Okay, they can do a lot of their reading outside of class, and we come back, and instead of me sitting and staring at children who are or not reading in front of me, instead we're discussing. We're having dialogue about what they read. We're doing assessments through this whole group dialogue. And so basically all the reading can take place outside of school because they have some kind of device. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. This is the one that I used to get so irritated with all these teachers who would tell me that they were not the reading teacher. Reading was not their job. They weren't the reading teachers. First of all, as it's been established, many schools will say if you're an employee in this school, you're a reading teacher. You may not even be a teacher, and you're a reading teacher now, because that is so important. Our literacy rates are alarming, and unfortunately we're seeing demonstration that they're dropping as well. And so there are lots of different things that teachers and other subjects can do. And I've thrown up just a few silly examples, but even your PE teacher, if he gets behind, hey guys, you're going to love this title. It's about this kid who finds out, he gets really upset over some situations, he starts to run just to clear his head, and he gets sucked into the football team because he's so awesome. And there we've got the book Stupid Fast. That took 5 minutes of the PE coach's time to get the kids excited about a book. Maybe he can give them another 5 minutes to read it on their devices while he takes attendance or something. And again, in that lesson plan, not only has he said that he's fostering reading in PE class of all places, but the students have just been introduced to a book they may not have otherwise read, and they've been given the opportunity to read it. That might be the only 5 minutes that day that student reads, because the PE teacher took the time to say, hey, while I'm getting the supplies out, or while I'm getting this game set up, you guys sit and read that book I told you about on your phones. Okay, and so it's a quick way to offer some classroom management as well, give the students something purposeful to do, but get them excited about something. And of course we see lots of other options there where different subjects can call in different reading material. Okay, let's take another look. Where are these little gems going to come from? Now that we've established ebooks are a great tool, where are you supposed to get them? First of all, major ebook retailers. That's your Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Smashwords, lots of places where we sell ebooks. Many of them are far cheaper, as I demonstrated with To Kill a Mockingbird. And so if you're discussing with your principal the purchase order, how much more likely do you think he will be to say, yes, we'll experiment with this. We'll put To Kill a Mockingbird on every single computer in the computer lab and see how it works for $3 each, versus having to have the school spend the money or the parents shell out the money for a print edition. Something else you can do, and that's the second item, is donors with gifting. So anyone can go to Amazon.com or another retailer, purchase the book and gift it. Not lend, that's a different program, but they can gift it. So all I have to do is click Buy as Gift, enter the recipient's email address, which can be the teacher's. It doesn't matter how many copies she receives. She can put those on different computers or devices by forwarding that, opening that email within the context of that other account. There can be some hoop jumping involved in that, I'm not going to lie to you. So it may involve setting up different Amazon accounts if the teacher owns all the devices. So basically each iPad, which would have its own unique email address associated with it, would need its own Amazon account if you're not getting them from Apple already, if you're not getting them from iBook Store. But yes, your donors can gift you a copy of the book. So you let the word get out that you need 40 copies for your classroom iPads of a particular title. Indie authors, and here I cannot say enough about the power of authors to give away their own content. I won't even say the title because I don't want this to sound like I'm plugging a book, but I've written a book in which a student reads Catcher in the Rye, hates it, and the rest of the book takes off from there. And as an author, I have given away more than 200 copies of that book in ebook form to different readers, to teachers, to students, to children, to adults, it doesn't matter. Basically, what I get out of that is the fact it didn't cost me anything. I've written 7 other books, and so maybe they'll like my free book enough to go buy something else I've written. But also I just know that there's a teacher out there who wants to do something interesting with her students and doesn't have the means to do it. And I've made that possible. And like I said, it didn't cost me anything. I direct them to websites where I can control free codes, and there they have it. If the students or the teachers choose to review the book or post a blog post about it, all the better. because I'm now more searchable online. When people are looking for something to read, they're going to see a lot more search hits. And so I do get something out of it. I get some compensation. So indie authors can be an excellent source of reading material. If you reached out to an author and said, I would love to work with your book in my classroom, how can I get a lot of copies of it? They're going to bend over backwards. And I've actually had authors who've emailed me Word documents. Oh, don't do that again. Send me a PDF if you have to. But they'll even email a PDF to the teacher and let the teacher put it on her classroom devices or her students' devices. Resource sites like Facebook. Facebook is such a powerful tool, especially in terms of looking for things. One thing I have done personally as a teacher is reached out to a famous author through Facebook and said, I am not asking you for a free book. I know you get flooded with requests. What I would like is for you to share my post. Please share my post that says, I would like donations of the ebook. I'm trying to get 40 copies from my class. When the author gets behind that, first of all, the author may surprise you. He or she may actually gift you some copies or some print copies. His publisher may do that. But again, they are probably inundated with requests for free books. So the fact that you stated, I don't want anything free from you, please just share my post and let that author say, look, here's this class. They're trying to read my book. Can you help them out? That author's connections are going to get behind your project, and they're going to help out because they love that author, which is why they're connected to that author on Facebook, and so they're going to turn around and help you connect other people to that author. So that's a great resource right there. Review copies. If you reach out to a publisher and say, I can guarantee you 45 reviews of this book today because we're going to get review copies. Can you send us the PDF? Can you send me eBooks? My students can use them. It doesn't cost you anything, and you don't have to ship them to me, and I will guarantee you every one of my students will write a well-crafted, well-thought-out review and post it to the retail websites. Again, you're giving something back, making it worth their while. You might offer, we're going to blog about it, or we'll be part of a blog tour or promotion while our students are reading it. You're basically letting consumers see that your students liked or didn't like this book, and the publisher will help you get behind that. That's powerful for them. You want to reach out to the publicity departments of those publishers. Now the last one, self-published, I'm not talking about indie authors, I'm talking about the teacher or students themselves. Let your students write a book. Have a class project all year long where your students are going to write an anthology and know that that ebook will be published and that next year students will read it. So write the material yourself and create an ebook and let your students read it. Have them become authors and share their work with each other. And again, that's a whole other project. You could write an entire curriculum out of that, but it's a great idea. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, some resources, and unfortunately, since developing this slide, we've actually come across two more today that I want to make sure to mention. There are a lot of sources where you can find books, or at least find the mention of the books. The first one I love was launched right around Book Expo this year, Self-E, and it's not a site that will provide books, but it's going to be a source of curation. And so especially if you want to reach out to these indie authors, people who have the power, the ability, and the drive to give you ebooks for your classroom, you got to make sure they're appropriate, and you have to make sure they're good. I hate to say that, but there is still a big stigma around some self-published works. And Self-E is a platform in conjunction with Library Journal and Biblioboards, and basically they read the book and decide yes or no. Is it appropriate? Is it labeled correctly for its age group and genre? And so is this something that you can get behind as a library or school? And basically right now, especially with Smashwords catalog feeding into Overdrive, libraries have more content than they've ever had. They have access to over 250,000 titles through Smashwords, but there is a significant amount of content on Smashwords, that may not be appropriate for all libraries. And so librarians either are tasked with sitting down and reading all the books before deciding that they want to include it for their library patrons, or not bothering at all. And Self-E was launched to address that problem, that librarians don't have the time and the resources to just sit and read all these books and make sure they're appropriate. and that's what they're going to do. So if you can get the list of titles for your genre you're looking for and the age category from Self-E, then you'll have library journals basically seal of approval. They're not getting into critiquing the book or saying it's worthy or not. It's simply, is it grammatically decent and is it appropriate for what it claims to be? Smashwords. Again, I love Smashwords. I've mentioned them so much during this webinar. The authors and rights holders on Smashwords can generate coupon codes for free copies. So this is where I said if you reached out to an author and said, I'd love to read your book with my students, I can promise you they'll all write a review for you, for example, upon reading it. The author can make a code for you to have as many copies as you need, as many as you two agree on, and it doesn't cost him anything. And so he has more incentive to do that, as opposed to, can you mail me 50 print copies of your book? The author can't do that. The author may not have 50 copies of the book. He has to pay for his copies too. And so eBooks take away that, and they take away that problem by letting him have the power to, type a few keystrokes and send you a coupon code you can use. Another outlet for that is InstaFreebie. And so if an author said to you, well, I don't know how to give you my book for free, direct him to instafreebie.com, where he can make a completely controllable coupon. Unlike Smashwords, InstaFreebie is not a retailer. People do not go to InstaFreebie to buy the book like they do at Smashwords. In order for the author to use a Smashwords coupon, the book would have to be available for sale on that site. And if that's not what the author has chosen to do, he can still take advantage of InstaFreebie. And that way you can be given a completely controllable code for as many copies of the book as you need. You can also have the format you need. You can have EPUB, MOBI, or PDF. And so that's a great tool to use to give away copies of a book or to let an author know, hey, if you'll upload it through InstaFreebie, we can use it. Publishers and authors review copies, again, offer to review a book. And especially if it's a publisher, tell them, just email me one PDF. I can handle it from there. I can take it, and I can make sure that we control this as well. So you could manually load the PDF if you had to on computers, or you could share that PDF through email with your students. Do let them know how many students you plan to share it with and where it plans to go from there. Some of them could come back and say, well, no, your students could share it and we don't want that to happen. But more likely than not, that's not going to be an issue, especially if they're actively seeking reviews. Two companies that I forgot to post on the slide, I'm very sorry about. There's a platform called Clovi, and I will spell that. It is Qlovi. It's getting a lot of attention. It actually won an award at Book Expo this year. They were the second place winner for their digital innovation. They are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they are a platform for teachers specifically to use ebooks in their classrooms. Again, they have lots of public domain works, so a lot of your classic titles. They carry a surprising number of books for young readers, which when we're talking about ebooks is less common. But basically it works in a token system where every teacher is given a predetermined number of tokens for the year to get copies of books on their classroom computers, devices, however. No student has to download anything. So any device, the classroom computer, a laptop, the student's phone, because it's browser-based, they just log into the teacher's bookshelf that the teacher establishes. They read the book they need, give it back, and you're entitled to so many books for a set amount of time. And again, once you exhaust your tokens, you have the ability to buy more. But again, a lot of the books are free in public domain. And so it's a great platform. Once again, that was Qlovi, Clovi. And finally, one really fun platform, especially if you're exploring ebooks, is BookTrack. And that is a site that I didn't think was going to take off the way it has, but it really has gotten a lot of traction and a lot of user base, especially in education and especially for special education. And basically it incorporates a soundtrack into the ebook as you read. So it can be done by the publisher or author. It can also be done by the reader. So the reader is allowed to select a book in BookTrack and add a soundtrack to it. The interesting thing about BookTrack and the algorithm, the way it works, is the speed of the music follows along with the speed of the reader. So the book music keeps up with how fast the user is reading. At the same time, when you are designing your soundtrack to go with your book, Some of them are incredibly sophisticated to the point that the music changes as the content of the book is changing. So if we have a couple walking through Central Park, the music is melodious and happy, and it's a bright sunny day. And when the attacker appears from behind a tree and steals the woman's purse and shoves the man down, the music becomes very dark and very sinister. And while that sounds like just a fun platform, the real benefit to it is that it's giving the reader the tone of their story. And so, especially for low ability level or uninterested readers, it lets the reader know how they're supposed to be feeling as they're reading this portion, and that's going to have a good impact on their understanding of the vocabulary. So if I hear the music turn scary or ominous, I know my tone has changed, and so it will help the reader stay engaged and stay involved within the context of the book. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Oh, we're ready for some questions.
Well, thank you, Mercy. This has definitely been a very informative webinar indeed. Several questions have already come in. Please bear with me for a second. And the first question that's come in is, how do teachers get approval for specific titles if they're not from typical book outlets?
That will always be a problem, and we are still seeing censorship, book banning. Cory Doctorow's book was banned this summer. Ellen Hopkins last fall had an issue with censorship. It's a universal fact that there are going to be titles that are going to have problems. That curation platform would go a long way, and again, that was Self-E. That will go a long way to producing some measure of reliability when you're demonstrating to your department head or your principal. Any reviews, a Publisher's Weekly review, for example, the Kirkus review of it, so major book reviews of a book will go a long way towards helping convince the powers that be if you have to convince someone. Otherwise, the last thing I would do is launch an ebook reading in my classroom without informing someone. This is not one of those times where it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, because asking forgiveness can sometimes happen on the 6 o'clock news in front of a group of angry parents. So I wouldn't try that in education. I would certainly request permission. But start with something logical. Start with, the ebook edition of an approved book, and say we'd like to explore ebooks in the classroom, and we're going to do it with this book that we've been using for years.
Great, thank you, Marcy. The next question that's come in is, how do you suggest publishers choose books to go digital?
Publishers. How does a publisher decide which book to digitize?
I'm waiting to hear back if the person replies.
Okay, great. Yeah, let me know. I will say that is in the market, by the way, that is based on interest in sales and pre-orders of a book. Now we're seeing that a lot less. We're actually seeing publishers start with digital. It used to be hardcover, then paperback, then ebook. And we're actually seeing that shift because it's easier to take a risk on a lower investment format, which is ebooks. I hope that answered the question. Okay.
Okay. Great, thank you. The next question is, a number of mainstream titles are barely cheaper in the ebook form as opposed to paperback.
Mm-hmm.
So why bother getting approval and incorporating them?
Right. First of all, you want to get that approval for the next title you want to read, and that's actually absolutely correct. We're seeing some titles and some publishers, there's barely any discount at all to use in the ebook. We will find for the books that are often used in curriculum, though, like the example I gave with To Kill a Mockingbird, those books have been around long enough that the publisher is not trying to recover the cost. So something like Popular, like The Fault in Our Stars, that is still very similar in the ebook and the paperback. It's in terms of price, but that book is not making its way into a lot of curriculum. You may have schools that want to use it, that want to explore that topic, and get approval for that, but that is a less common whole group instruction. It's very common in libraries, though, and so libraries, by the way, are still struggling with the cost of ebook versus paper being so close.
Great, thank you. The next question, Mercy, is investing in ebooks risky since the students can't use them from year to year?
Yes and no. They can be depending on the platform you're using. So for example, the Clovey platform, and I adore those people, and it's a great company. You are using that book today, and that is it. Or I'm sorry, for this time period, I think it's 6 weeks. But that's correct. So if you're using that book year to year to year, you're not going to end up with this one set of books that you can use over and over. However, when you use print books in a classroom, especially with 40 students in a class, 6 classes a day, you're going to lose some of those print books too. And so that's just part of the cost of instruction. If you have PDF versions, or where you've bought the book and have it on computers in the school or in school devices, that file will stay there year to year. But if you're letting the students have the code, then that becomes the students' device's property.
Okay, great. The next question is, my school has not adopted bring your own devices as of yet. Is it still possible to incorporate eBooks?
Yes, you can absolutely use them at home, even if you're not doing your reading in class. And that's actually something that I always preferred to do, even when I was working strictly out of print books, was to distribute my book to my students, give them the sections they had to read, and then encourage them to read the rest of it. I didn't like to sit in a classroom and watch my students read a book. I liked to send them out with the book and say, tomorrow our topic's going to be this. We're going to talk about the time Scout did that. And so absolutely, you can use eBooks in that way. You're still taking advantage of the convenience and the price point without having to bring that book and that device into the classroom if you don't have that permission. Of course, this could be a great way to start a bring your own device initiative at your school.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, Mercy, kids are careless. What about the loss or breakage of equipment?
That is a huge concern in schools. One, right off the bat, bring your own device addresses that completely. Basically, the agreement the parents sign, when they're signing that their students will be responsible and will behave and will not be on websites they don't belong, will not be sexting in class, that's part of it. If your device is stolen or lost or broken, that is on the parents. Some schools are offering insurance plans where they can buy through the school, buy a low-cost annual insurance plan, even for bring your own device. Now, schools that are providing their own technology, they are running into that. They're finding it still, though, to be far less of a problem than we originally thought, mostly because the students are stepping up. This is technology they need. They know it. It's exciting and engaging. It's something new. It's not, composition books and a pencil, and they're excited to be a part of it. And they know if I break my device or lose it or leave it at home, I'm out. I'm back to this paper textbook and a notebook, and I don't get to keep up and do what my classmates are doing. So basically the industry as a whole has been pleasantly surprised by the lack of problems with loss and theft of or damage to the devices.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that's come in is, how does tech support work, either for students with their own devices or with school supplied technology? I'm thinking of learning to use updating systems, etc.
Right. I can say my own children attend a bring your own device school, and that is one of the top issues is, hey, I can't get on the Wi-Fi, or I can't get this to open. That's the student's problem. And again, that is addressed up front. And so we don't have, you don't find out 2 months after the school year has started and you've bought an expensive iPad that you're also responsible for educating yourself on using it. They have plenty of opportunities before the school year starts for students to come up, log in, get one-on-one help, so that teacher's not running around to 30 desks and trying to get 30 kids on the Wi-Fi. So they've made it very streamlined. They have an excellent filter in place if this comes up at that school. And so there are so many sites our students can't access. In fact, it was incredibly frustrating one year. They couldn't access Amazon, so they couldn't buy the eBooks, and that was quickly fixed. And again, that comes down to trust. The reason Amazon was blocked is because teachers could be sitting there shopping all day instead of teaching. That's horrible. If you can't trust your teachers to teach in their classrooms instead of shopping, then you've got bigger problems, and blocking a website's not going to do it. And so they actually came back and unblocked Amazon so students could access books and their libraries. So it comes down to educating parents and giving them opportunities to get comfortable with the technology. But as far as providing tech support, bring your own device schools do not usually provide tech support.
Thank you. And this appears to be the last question.
Okay.
Do you have an interactive website where students can record their progress and teachers can give them input?
Do they exist? Absolutely. There are learning platforms like that. CourseSmart and LearnSmart from McGraw-Hill Education are two of the most well-known. In terms of tailoring that to specific classrooms or public education, a lot of teachers are having great luck with even things as simple as Google Docs, where they can keep up with it. Scholastic has its Storia platform, where they can track how much reading time was spent within a book, how many minutes were spent per page even. So yeah, there are a lot of different platforms that offer some kind of program that will monitor and help students and give feedback to teachers on how much time was actually spent within the text of an ebook.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mercy. This has been a wonderful and informative webinar indeed. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. This concludes today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archives section of our website at www.dclab.com. Also, our next webinar will be next Wednesday, July 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Clear Writing, Simple Steps to Make Your Communication Clear, being presented by Sharon Burton, a content strategy consultant. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.